Hello my friends, it is April the 30th of 2023. This video is entitled 25 Years of Being a Metalhead. Okay, so I'm 36 years old now. I got into heavy metal when I was 11 years old. So it's been 25 years. Yeah, it's been a good long while. So in this video, I'm going to take you on my heavy metal journey. I'm going to talk to you about how I discovered heavy metal, some of the initial bands that I got into, as well as a lot of the various other bands that I've gotten into throughout the years, as well as a lot of the different styles of heavy metal that I've gotten into throughout the years. I'm going to talk to you about how I got into playing guitar and writing my own music as well. So yeah, I'm going to get into all that. This is going to be a fairly extensive video, so yeah, just letting you know. All right, so let's get right into this. Okay, so like I mentioned, I got into heavy metal when I was 11 years old. Prior to that, I was mostly just listening to like a lot of just rock music, a lot of just like radio rock music, nothing too heavy. But yeah, that's pretty much where I started. So, yeah, around 11 years of age, I definitely had a taste for like heavier music, and I was definitely starting to get more exposure to some different bands, some sort of like heavier bands, more like hard rock type stuff as well. But yeah, one of the first bands that got me into like the heavier stuff would be Nirvana. Okay, so yeah, these are some of the albums that I got into when I was around 11 years old. I remember listening to these albums quite a lot when I was like 11, 12, 13. Yeah, I just love Nirvana so much. I still really enjoy them a lot. I still listen to Nirvana fairly regularly. Great band. I wouldn't necessarily consider them a metal band. I know they aren't classified as such, but they definitely have a heavier and darker sound. So yeah, I would say they are definitely sort of my gateway into sort of like heavier music. Soundgarden was another band that I got into. And of course Alice in Chains, Dirt. Yeah, so those are some of the albums I really enjoyed so much when I was around 11, 12. Offspring, another great band. I remember listening to them quite a bit, especially their earlier albums are just fantastic in my opinion. The Smashing Pumpkins, Foo Fighters. This right here was actually the first album I ever purchased, Big Shiny Tunes 2. There's nothing too heavy on here, but there's a few heavier songs on here. But yeah, this is just sort of where I started. I actually bought this album when I was 11 years of age, so that's when I started to collect albums. So yeah, I've been collecting albums for 25 years now as well. So and yeah, I have a pretty extensive collection, as you can see back there. All right, so yeah, that was sort of like my introduction to heavier music. And of course, Rage Against the Machine was another band that I was into, Ozzy Osbourne, stuff like that. I was listening to still a lot of like radio rock music, but the radio stations back then when I was growing up, they definitely tended to play some heavier stuff, so that was really exciting. Especially in the evening, they would play some like heavier stuff, so that was exciting. Those stations have since changed. They're not as intense anymore, but back then it was fairly exciting. But yeah, it was basically my exposure to music back then. Of course, this would have been before the internet. This would have been around 1997, so the internet was still in its infancy at that time. There was no YouTube or social media, and certainly no streaming of any sort. So that was basically my exposure to music at that time, was just like rock radio. All right, so yeah, that was my initial exposure to heavy music. And but yeah, afterwards I definitely had a taste to get into more and more heavier stuff. And I think the first proper heavy metal band that I got into, I suppose you could say, was Metallica. Okay, so the Black Album, I bought this I believe when I was like 11 years old. Amazing album, still my favorite Metallica album. Still enjoy this one so much. And yeah, it's excellent. I really enjoy this album. I remember listening to it so much. I was so happy to get this album. And yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't make much money back then. I would have gotten a little bit of allowance or did some odd jobs here and there, so I didn't buy many albums back then. And but yeah, so whenever I did buy an album, I was always excited. And Justice for All, bought that when I was around 12 years old, I believe. Great album, pretty heavy, just a ripping thrash metal album right here. And of course the Load and Reload, I remember listening to those ones quite a lot as well when I was like 11, 12. Really enjoyed those ones. I still like the Load albums. I think they're really good. So yeah, those are some of like the initial heavy bands that I got into. So as I got a little bit older, especially into my teens, especially into high school when I was like 14, 15. I definitely had a taste for even heavier stuff, and so at that time, this would have been like in the early 2000s. Nu metal was at its height back then, so nu metal was something that I got into. There was so much of it out there, and I was starting to get into like reading metal magazines like Circus and Hit Parader, as well as like Guitar World and stuff like that. So it was definitely being heavily exposed to a lot of the nu metal stuff, and nu metal is something I still really appreciate so much. And I'll just show you some of the albums, some of the nu metal albums that I would have gotten into. So Korn, obviously. Disturbed, I remember listening to them quite a bit, especially their first couple of albums. Godsmack, their first couple of albums were pretty important to me. Drowning Pool, their first album right here, really enjoy that one so much. And of course, Slipknot, their first couple of albums, I remember listening to those ones quite a lot when I was in high school. Yeah, Iowa especially, that one was, I remember when I heard that one, I was I was really blown away. I couldn't believe it. It's pretty heavy, this album, and yeah, it's pretty good stuff. And so yeah, and of course Mudvayne, a band that I still appreciate quite a bit. Stain, their earlier albums are really good. And of course System of a Down, excellent stuff right here. I remember listening to this album when I was like 15. It came out I think in September of 2001, so yeah, I would have been 15 at the time. Yeah, I was just blown away as well, right? This album is just fantastic, really heavy. And of course I was also simultaneously getting into other stuff that wasn't nu metal back when I was like 14, 15. Fear Factory was a band that I got into when I was like 14. I think I bought this album here, Digimortal, when I was like 14. Yeah, I think this album came out in 2000. I still really enjoy this album. I think it's fantastic. Of course, this is another Fear Factory album right here. Yeah, Fear Factory. I still appreciate them. And one of the most important bands for me, a band that I got into when I was like 15, Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power, Far Beyond Driven, and of course their other albums as well. Pantera, I just love them so much. I just listened to them so much when I was in high school. And of course when Dimebag passed away, I was so heartbroken. Very, very tragic event. I still think about it sometimes, and yeah, it's very, very unfortunate that he passed away, and the circumstances surrounding that. Yeah, Tool was another band that I really appreciated so much. Still enjoy their earlier albums. Yeah, great stuff. So yeah, that was kind of the stuff I was listening to back when I was like 14, 15, 16. I guess around 16, 17, 18, I was starting to get a little bit more into, I guess, like thrash metal, death metal. Started to get a little bit more into like black metal. That was sort of like my first exposure to black metal, I guess, was around the time I was like 18, 19. But yeah, started to get away from sort of the nu metal stuff, started to distance myself a little bit from that. And I guess around the mid 2000s, nu metal was starting to sort of decline quite a lot in popularity. And but yeah, Slayer, obviously, I remember listening to this album quite a bit when I was like 16, 17. Machine Head, this is an album I listened to quite a lot. Megadeth, of course, great band. This was the first album that I bought from them. Megadeth, excellent stuff. Opeth, I was really heavily into. Their early to mid-period albums to me are just fantastic. I don't care whatsoever for their more recent albums. I just cannot get into it whatsoever. But Opeth was definitely a very important band for me back when I was like 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, and this album right here especially, Deliverance, fantastic album. One of the most important albums for me ever. An album that just changed my life. Morbid Angel with Heretic. Yeah, just fell in love with Morbid Angel back when I was like 17, 18. Bought this album a little while after it came out, so this was the first album that I bought from Morbid Angel. Still love this album so much. Still my favorite Morbid Angel album. Excellent stuff. This is just an absolute masterpiece in my opinion. And of course I bought all of the other Morbid Angel albums like Gateways to Annihilation and all the other ones like Ultras and Madness and Blessed Are the Sick and Covenant and all that stuff. Cradle of Filth, another important band for me. I discovered them when I was like 18. Damnation in a Day, this was the first album that I purchased from them. I just love this album so much. I would have purchased this one shortly after it came out. Yeah, so this was sort of like my introduction to like black metal, I suppose. yeah, they definitely have more of a black metal type of sound, I suppose. But yeah, definitely kind of my first exposure to a more kind of black metal type of sound. Amphetamine, that one, I bought that one when it came out. So yeah, Cradle Filth, still love them so much. They're still one of my absolute favorite bands. I have all their albums, all their full lengths and EPs. Strapping Young Lad, that's another band that I got into around when I was like 18. I remember seeing them perform live, and that was just fantastic. Yeah, Strapping Young Lad. Of course, Cannibal Corpse, all right. Kill, this was the first album that I bought from them. Bought it shortly after it came out. So this was my first exposure to Cannibal Corpse. So yeah, I was definitely starting to get into more like black metal and death metal stuff towards my late teens. Emperor, bought this one when I was 19, I believe, 18, 19. So yeah, this was one of the first like black metal albums that I bought. And yeah, to me this is just a phenomenal album. Still my favorite Emperor album. An underrated album in my opinion. Most people prefer their earlier stuff, but to me this is just an absolute masterpiece. At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul, bought this one when I was around 19. Phenomenal album, great Swedish melodic death metal album right here. Absolute masterpiece, 10 out of 10. I remember listening to this one so much, still listen to it. At the Gates are such a phenomenal band. So yeah, I was definitely starting to get into some other stuff, especially around the time I was like 19, 20. Started to get more into like European style death metal and black metal, of course. And Carcass, another band. Of course, such a legendary death metal band. This was the first album that I bought from them, Swan Song. I still really enjoyed so much. It's an underrated album in my opinion. I've gotten to some of their other stuff as well, but yeah, I was definitely starting to get more into that kind of stuff. I should also mention that I started to play guitar when I was 13. Bought my first electric guitar when I was 15, so yeah, I was definitely starting to get more into guitar playing around my mid to late teens. I was definitely practicing quite a lot, and yeah, I had purchased some different gear like pedals, and had an amp, and I bought a bass guitar when I was like 18, I believe. So yeah, I was starting to practice quite a bit and figure it out, and hadn't written anything in my teens. It would take me up until my early 20s before I would start to figure out how to actually write music. But yeah, all right, so in my early 20s especially, I started to get into some different bands like Soilwork, still love them so much. And of course Enslaved, this was the first album that I bought from them. Excellent band, I have all their albums. Dimmu Borgir, obviously, great Norwegian black metal band. Satyricon, this is the first album that I bought from them. So of course this was the kind of stuff that I was really getting heavily into, especially in my early 20s. You know, kind of going a bit more into the underground stuff, darker and heavier stuff. Wolves in the Throne Room, this is the first album that I bought from them. Great band, still enjoy their music so much. Yeah, great, phenomenal band. Drutk, another band that I just absolutely adore. I think this is the first album that I purchased from them. So yeah, and I do have all their albums. Phenomenal band. And I was also, especially towards my mid-20s, I suppose, I started to get really heavily into like doom metal. So bands like Down, phenomenal album right here. This is Nola. That's the first Down album that I ever purchased. Absolute masterpiece right there. Reverend Bizarre, one of my absolute favorites. Love them so much. Candlemass, obviously, such a great band. Saint Vitus, I love this album. Born Too Late, phenomenal album right here. Electric Wizard, I remember when this album came out, I listened to it and I just thought, man, this is just incredible. This is still my favorite Electric Wizard album. I have all their albums, I enjoy them so much. Great band. So yeah, I was definitely starting to get more into doom metal. I was listening to doom metal prior to my mid-20s, but around my mid-20s I just got so heavily into doom metal. And yeah, another great band here, Count Raven, love them so much. High on Infinity right here, masterpiece. I remember listening to this album so much, still listen to it. It's a 10 out of 10. Pentagram, of course, another one of my favorites. Relentless, great album. Witchcraft, another sort of like retro doom metal type of band. This album right here is phenomenal. I just really enjoy Witchcraft, and was getting into different styles of heavy metal as well, like power metal and some folk metal. I never got into power metal that much, but folk metal a little bit more, and I was sort of branching out, discovering just all the different styles of metal, and reading different metal magazines, and getting much more deeply into it. And of course a band like Encifrum being a folk metal band. I did see them perform live, so yeah, just an example of the kind of stuff I was getting more deeply into. So yeah, my early 20s, around 22. So yeah, this would have been around 2009. I started to write my own music, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. I've always wanted to write my own music and write and create my own band. I always wanted to be a one-man band. That was my dream, even from when I was like in my early teens. That's what I wanted to do, so that's what I decided to do, and it was quite the process. Initially, just me trying to figure out how to write music. My skills weren't so good back then, but I did what I had to do, and I purchased some basic gear. I had a 4-track digital recorder initially, and I recorded a lot on that Zoom 4-track digital recorder, and that's what I had. And I would just write music and record it in my bedroom, and yeah, put out a lot of material. I'll just give you some examples of some of the CDs that I would put out. It was all just DIY homemade stuff. I would create covers from pictures that I would take, and burn the CDs on my laptop. So yeah, this is my very first album right here, if you want to call it an album, a demo, whatever it is you want to call it. I mean, you know, looks very primitive looking, you know, just a CDR I would print on my laptop. I think I made like 8 copies of this one. I would just give them out to people that I knew, co-workers or friends or whoever, right? And so yeah, and I should mention too that my initial, or my first band, I suppose, is entitled My Cross. So I was My Cross for many years. That was my band. And of course, I did release quite a few of these like CDR, DIY type of albums. This is another one right here. Quite a few of them. I'm just going to show you some of them, but yeah, another one right here. Here's another. I'm not going to show you all of them, but yeah, then I changed my name after a while. Then I was Unrest for a period of time. I did release this one, an album right here, World of Lies. I think I came out with this album when I was around 30. Great album, like just very cold, very dark sounding, like atmospheric black metal. That's more or less what it is. And then I switched gears. I decided, you know, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to kind of alter my style, and so I just decided on the name Ordo Ab Chao. This was around 2017, and then I released this album right here, Pain and Piss. So yeah, very happy with this album. As you can see, it's a more professionally printed CD right here. Looks really good. Of course, this is a picture that I took, and I always took my own pictures for my albums early on, up until just recently actually. But yeah, very pleased with this album still. So that was the beginnings of Ordo Ab Chao, and of course Hermetical Desolation. That's my second album. This is a split I put out with Scars, another band here in Manitoba, and this is Crossing the Abyss, and then my most recent album, Dark Mirror of Magic. Very happy with this album still. Very pleased with it. Looks very good. Well written, well recorded, well mixed. Excellent cover art right here. Yeah, very pleased with that album. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my heavy metal journey. Just love metal so much, and still continue to discover new bands. Still continue to collect albums. I have about 1,700 albums in my collection right now, so I have a pretty extensive collection, mostly CDs. I do have some vinyl and CD cassettes as well, but yeah, always building on the collection, always discovering new bands, and I'm very active online promoting my band, and I'm writing a new album right here, and it's coming along really well, and yeah, I know that this album is just going to turn out fantastic. I'm working really hard on it, and yeah, so what can I say? What else can I say here? I just yeah, so passionate about heavy metal. It's been such a big part of my life, and yeah, it's been 25 years since I've been a metalhead. 25 years, that's quite a long time that this music has been a part of my life, and it's played such a huge part of my life. It's been with me every day, and it's just been so helpful for me in my life. you know, for me it's like a religion. It's just been there for me throughout the years and has literally saved my life, you know. It's been it's just helped me so much, and I love it so much as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And so yeah, 25 years of being a metalhead. Okay, so 25 years of being a metalhead. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. It's been a very interesting journey, that's for sure. Yeah, I love this music so much. I'm just so deeply passionate about it, and will continue to be passionate about it until the day I die, and who knows, probably well beyond that. To me, this music is just eternal. I just love it so much. Okay, so yeah, let me know what you think. Leave some comments. I'm always curious to know what you guys think, and I want to say thank you very much for watching, and I want to say thanks to all the people who watch my videos and subscribe to my channel. I really truly appreciate it. Take care, my friends. Cheers.